Hello, everybody. Welcome to the bonus stream. We are here and we are ready to make some funky stuff in Cinema 4D. Who is here in the chat? We got Donna, of course. Havard, what's going on? Tess, hello. What's going on? Hello, hello. Make sure that this isn't super public up on YouTube. James Clark, first one you've been able to tune in for a while. Welcome back. Let's see. Oh, off the record 11, public. Unlisted, done. Save. Was it set to public? That's fine if it was. It's an accident. I'm going to set the visibility to unlisted, and hopefully that changes it. Let me go ahead and refresh real quick. Tobias, what's going on? Refreshing that. Excellent. Hello. Testing. Hi. Edit video. I'm just double checking a couple settings here. Making sure I swore I set it to only be set to as unlisted, but it seemed to have, yeah, there we go. Well, it seems okay. Alrighty. Audio muted. Hello, everybody. All right, so we didn't specifically have a plan built up today, but I had something that I thought of earlier that I think that everyone would like generally, and that is yesterday a question popped up in the Rocket Lasso Live, and that question, let me track it down, or get the right window open anyway. Boop. Where is it? Where is it? I guess it was open in Chrome, not that. All right, just give me 1 second here to find the link. There it is. Aha. So, let me share the screen. And click over here. Boom. So somebody had linked me over to MBG Core. I don't know much about who this is, but they were doing some really cool stuff in some of their different videos. So they're doing like these different explosions and breaks and just really fun stuff all over the place. So I thought it might be fun for us to explore, just do some exploration of tinkering around doing this kind of stuff, see what kind of effects and breaks and connections and whatnot we can do. Just have fun with fields and explosions. And I just updated to the newest X particles. So an additional hope, and I should have had the video audio off there. Hopefully you couldn't hear that. Another hope here is to see if we can get some X particles driving on these parts as they break apart. I'm not even sure how to do that, but I thought that'd be another neat thing to do. So I thought that would sound fun and everybody would enjoy that. So why don't we jump right on in and see if we can tinker around a little bit. So I'm going to start in much the way the upcoming tutorial is going to come out. By the way, let's check out the video. Here's a super quick rough edit of the tutorial, and you know, I can go through the entire thing, and there's like fields here, and then the breaking apart and chunks, and then the getting extra cracks going, and then at the end we start doing some redshift and material things. But this is 2.5 hours long, almost exactly, and I haven't recorded the intro or the outro yet, so that's gonna be a big old beefy one. But this should be good. But in any case, we're going to start in a very similar way just because I'm familiar with the dynamic settings here. But most of what we do today will be new things I haven't specifically done. But we've got our cube. Actually, we probably can start out smaller so everything runs a little quicker. Let's go ahead and make a Voronoi fracture, make the cube a child, and now we get these chunks. And we can have a bunch of fun generating these chunks in different random directions. Now, there's always a lot of interesting collisions that are happening with dynamics. In these cases, I can go make a bunch of chunks here, and that's working fine. But these points are being randomly generated in the entire space. So we get all these angles being created, and then that means when we're making it dynamic, pieces can fall away in some strange ways. Let's go ahead and create a simulation rigid body tag. And right now, everything's going to be getting applied. If I hit play, everything's just going to fall away. It's running pretty quick because we're using regular Voronoi Fronoid chunks here. But if we go to our MoGraph, if we go to the dynamics tab, then dynamics are turned on, but there's based on a MoGraph selection. So if we were to add a nice MoGraph selection tag here, then we can turn on fields with it, and I'm going to add on no freeze, but we do want a spherical field here. So now we have a spherical field that we can move or scale into position. So let's go ahead and do it that way. I'm going to remap. We're going to have it be a full fall off. We'll have this be bigger. And now if we were to go into our fracture, let's go ahead and name this just to be nice and clean. MoGraph selection. Start. That's fine. Or you know what? Let's just call it dynamic. So if we were to hit, let's give ourselves some more frames. 333. Double click to make it the full length. If we hit play, then we should be. Oh, did I? We have to go into the dynamics tag and put the MoGraph selection dynamic in there. And now when I play, nothing is dynamic. But if we go and we grab this and we drag it down, as it passes through, those different chunks are going to become dynamic. Now, something that's interesting is as the pieces fall away, you see they fall away, but then they fall out of the fall off, and then they suddenly explode and they start trying to return to the original position. So right off the bat, we have to do something interesting, which is go into our fields, and we have to make it so if the fall off ever touches it, it stays. So we're going to create a decay, and we'll put maximum there. So now, with any luck, once the spherical field goes in, any given one of the selections is going to remember its selection, and it can just continue to fall away. Now, this works pretty well right out of the gate. I'm going to shorten it, 222. This works really well out of the gate, and when all these chunks fall away, it's doing a very nice, clean, quick job of calculating those falling away. So, okay, all good there. But they can start intermingling a bit in some interesting ways, and one of the first ways, and one of the things I like doing is definitely applying making these, adding some geometry glue. So if we turn on geometry glue in our fracture, turn on cluster, we can set a set number of chunks here, and now they start becoming more complex shapes. But that means when we hit play that they're going to explode because they now have concave areas, which means we need to change our dynamics from automatic to moving mesh. And that makes everything start running pretty slow, but you'll immediately see like them start interacting in these very strange ways because of the way they're interlocked with each other. And we have a margin, so let's hit Controller Command D, and we're going to go to Dynamics, and we're going to go to Expert, and I'm going to say collision margin of 0. So now they don't have that margin around, so hopefully it won't explode so much. But you can see how they're getting caught on each other. You can start getting these little jitters introduced into the system where they're trying to escape, but they're intersecting. So that's all. These are all kind of limitations and tricky parts that that we have to deal with and work around. Now we're going to get into stuff I haven't tinkered with too much lately. But if we go back, turn off our geometry glue, and instead of using geometry glue, we start using connectors, and we create a fixed connector. Then the hope would be that there is now a connection built in between all of our different in between each of these different sections here, they are being connected with a fixed connector. We can also go back to our dynamics and set that back to automatic, so it should run a little quicker. But they're connected now, but with them being connected, I think that means they're not going to fall away. I also want to make sure that they don't turn off. So in our dynamics tag, let's make sure that our dynamics deactivation is set to 0 and 0. So now they should always be trying to go, and you can see there's a little bit of jitter there, which I guess for the purposes of final render isn't good, but for our purposes of being able to tell that that's actually working is fine. Okay. Let's see. Pete, welcome. Drake, hello. Thanks for coming and hanging out. Shahid, hello. Welcome. Anyway, going back to this, we've got our different connections here, and that's good, and that's fine. And this is saying what is dynamic, but they're all dynamic. So a lot of stuff starts going to, do we make it those are dynamic. So how do we start forcing them away? Do we actually crash into it with a physical object, or do we create some sort of simulation force? So I'm going to say particle attractor, and we can now put a. This is automatically applying to all the dynamics, and I can say I want a strength of it's attracting, but let's say negative 55. Not going to see much. Let's pull it downward. I'm going to say negative 555. Still not really seeing much. Let's put another 0 on there. There, we actually are seeing some sort of reaction, but they're still stuck together. So let's go even further. And I think that's going to be enough to, yes, force it away. So that's a really big amount of force, enough to actually break those connections. So in there, we can go and make a fall off. Let's make another spherical fall off there. We'll make that radius bigger. And I'm not sure if we'd want a fall off or not, but based on that, we can move below and we can move this up and then go boom and force things through as this force passes. And it's still trying to maintain that connection. So, it's kind of cool that we can get that type of connection going. Now, what I'd like to see is these break apart a little bit. In fact, I guess I'll turn off the attractor because maybe we'll use it again. But I can create a simulation wind instead because I want a very even distribution of the force. So let's go ahead and do negative 90 for rotation. So we're actually aiming upward, and it should automatically be applied already. And if we go to 555, I don't think we'll see much, but at 55555, it should be semi attractor, and boom, we get that big explosion. In fact, it's quite strong. I'm going to lower it down to 2. Still insanely strong. Wow, okay. Once it breaks, it's enough to really explode it all outward. But that might be fine because now what I would like to do is create a box field. And let's make our box field really wide. Oop, and because we're rotated, the angle is different. So there we go. And it's already got some fall off. So the hope here would be I can take my wind. And right now it's having no effect. But as I go up at a certain point, it's going to suddenly want to push all of them. And my hope here is that with the geometry glue that we're going to get some interesting chunks sticking together. And I mean, obviously we do see that big chunk stuck together until it falls through and then the wind forces it to explode. Let's go ahead and make this maybe not quite as strong, about a third. Let's see if it's still strong enough. Boom, yes. Now we have some additional things to maybe tinker with. Now, unfortunately, I'm sad that there's not more settings here for our braking force. We just had this very absolute number. It is applied or it's not. And I'd really love some sort of noise in here or some sort of fall off or ways of turning it on or turning off. And there really just isn't any. Because what I'd love to do is make these forces stronger. I'm not sure which one of these is actually the stronger one, but if we more than double that, and we pull this up, yeah, it's enough for it to not be able to actually punch through. You can see there's a little bit of warping through it, but now I'm just going to counter by adding a little bit more wind. And let's see, nope, still not quite enough. Okay, that's enough again, but, well, unfortunately, now we're back to the same problem, which is it's holding really tight until it finally breaks. And I'd like to see a little bit more of, a little more variation in the way that's being applied. Now, a way we might be able to get around that now is with our wind going to our fall off, and let's try adding in some randomness as well. So if we use our random field, that calculates quicker than the shader field. So I try and use this whenever I can. Let's go ahead and see a preview of our scale. We're going to make that way bigger and bigger still. There we go. So we get some variation in it, maybe even a little smaller, 3. And we can go into our remapping and, no, not min. We want to go into our curve and turn on this curve. And now I can pinch it in and increase our contrast on the way it's being applied, which is pretty cool. And now we can set that to multiply on top of our box field. So now, hopefully, now the wind has some variation as we come up and punch through. So yeah, okay, well, it's punched through in an interesting way. I'm going to go ahead and make some more of these dynamic. I'm going to spread out our circle because I do like the idea of some of them on the edge not being able to fly away, just so we can very clearly see. Okay, well, there you go. Automatically got something a little more interesting. We're actually getting... the wind is applying right away because it's in the beginning, but I like... Look at this crack and explosion as those fly up. Like I like that quite a bit. So that's cool. Um, Now, once again, I'm sad that there's no way of doing additional braking for us, because what I'd love to do is make it so that those will brake more as they're traveling through the air. Like randomly, they might brake. We did do that one trick in the one live stream we where we were able to have like a little sphere start appearing in between, so they could potentially brake more often, and that was fun. I do like that brake. Um, and we get the more interesting looking chunks this way anyway. So yeah, that's cool. Um, let's see. Well, let me hang on. I'm gonna check some chat stuff. Did I figure out my X particles problem? What X particles problem did I have? The ability to update it? If so, yes. Bob helped me figure out that there was two instances of it because I had to do a custom install originally, and then now I can successfully update. If that's what you mean. I'm not sure who's. Um, I don't know what you mean by Nick's tutorial. Um, but yeah, you guys seem to be having a separate conversation, which is cool. But yeah, I would really love to see these parts break apart more. But there's no way to do that, as far as I know, except for this connector, lowering this connector's force and its torque. Like eventually, that will just get to a threshold in which it can break, which is dangerous. Like it's got very 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 specific thresholds. That's the frustrating part. Is if I suddenly lower it really low, all the pieces might fly apart. But then it's like, okay, cool, we calibrate it to be this very perfect, precise amount. But the instant that we do that, the we change the force a little bit. Let's say we're like, oh, it's blasting too far up in the air. We'll weaken that a little bit, and then suddenly these numbers don't work anymore. So I'd want something a little bit better, something where it's like, oh, it's just passing through some sort of fall off. It's weakening in certain points in certain places, and that just doesn't. Just doesn't seem to be a variable we can deal with. Um, we can break certain random ones, but that's not what I want. So yeah, tricky. Let's go ahead and save this, and we definitely got a bunch of different things to tinker with, though. I guess I'll put this in the episode 11 folder. Okay, so we could explore. So making these things fracture again is definitely one thing I'd like to explore. Now I'm curious. I just want to take a look at Espresso here and see if there are any special nodes or outputs or anything. Um, Object properties, force, ignore collisions, torque, type, and then we can make a dynamic object. So we can make a connector state. So that's the connector. So we can just feed that in as an object. And there's a connector state. And then is it broken? How many connections are there? But see, it just says, is it broken, unless there is an index? There's an object index. And then there's a broken input. So we might be able to do is, with Espresso, make things break. I always get a little fuzzy on iteration. I mean, I know how to do it, but I always kind of am guessing every time. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to try and make it so that they all break apart at frame 30. So let's make a Espresso general time, not time, but frame. And then we're going to say, well, that's just going to output that, and we need to compare it. Logic, compare. So when the frame equals 30, then that is now going to be a true statement at a particular time. And now we need an iteration. So here we can output, I probably need a second instance of this connector state, because if we feed that through, we can get a count of the total number of connections being made, I think, which means we can then make a Espresso iterator iteration node, and we can say start at 0 iteration and go all the way through the count. And as it's going through there, then that becomes the object index. It's going to iterate through all of them, and we can feed it the state of being broken. So here's broken, and we can say, yes, I want it to be broken, which is I don't know if we want that to be true or false. So I'm going to make a constant here. We're going to change the constant to be a bool, which is true or false. We can feed that through broken, and I'm going to say, well, it's false right now. So if that's working at all, well, I don't know. We have to try, but it might be entirely broken already. And it's not. They're still connected. So now let's try making it true. And they're still all connected. So that doesn't seem to be doing anything. Dynamics connector state. We're feeding in an object already, but let's go ahead and check out the help file. Yeah, we want to put in a connector or spring. It would use all the connectors or springs in the entire project as reference. That's pretty crazy. Internally, all springs are numbered. Broken. This option can be used to break connectors. They will no longer work. It can be repaired again. Oh, that's interesting. By again selecting the option. And it will reset to its original state. Well, that's interesting. Interesting to know. Hi, Bob. How's it going? We're going to be doing a little bit of X particle stuff later, too, if you're interested. Oh, I shouldn't. If you wiggle the window, which I just did, I wiggled my window around just gesturing, and it makes everything else minimize. It's like, don't do that, don't minimize. But reading that quick little thing is implying that we can break and repair connections, which is intriguing, but these are clearly not broken, and right now we're saying broken value true. Maybe you have to make it only on a particular frame. So I'm going to say on, and on is only going to be at frame 30. So at frame 30, we'll see if anything happens. Kind of doubt it, but let's see. Frame 30, nothing happened. So now let's try changing that to false. And see if we can get that to do anything. So explodes, frame 30. Nope, nothing again. We just need to make this do something so we can be sure that it's working. So let's try getting rid of our object index for a moment. And we're just going to say the entire object is on or off at frame 30. So let's try that one. So they're all combined, and then nothing. Let's try true. Frame 30, nothing. Let me make sure the real number is equal to 30. We're outputting frame. Okay, so it wants a dynamic object. Now I'm feeding in the object via that object tab just as a way of checking. I'm going to manually put in the connector. And let's try again. Nope, again. And nope again. Dang. I mean, now we're using it. We're trying to use this in a very, very straightforward way now. And it's not seeming to do anything. Think-a-dink-a-doo, breaking force index. I don't understand. break. Input a specific connector or spring. If the object remains empty, it does all of them. An object index can then in turn be used if a specific one should be used. One of the problems could be that these are our individual. Let me think. Let me read this a little bit more, and then I'll talk my way through it. We have if the object field was empty, it would return it. So the count wouldn't be iterating necessarily. So I don't know how many are created. So we could just manually tell that to iterate a bunch more times. I kind of don't feel like that would do anything, but it's something. So let's get rid of that count, and we're just going to iterate through, I don't know how many chunks we have, 200 something. But I'm just going to say go ahead and iterate through 500. 0 to 500 at just every single number going through. And let's see if that does anything. It does not again. And it doesn't again. Hey Sam. Hey Cloud. I'm trying to get this. We're trying to make it so we have more control over a connector. The problem is that when we do a connector inside the Voronoi object, it's breaking weight, torque weight, use connector. These are weights and fall-offs. I guess the connector tab does have, you can feed fall-offs, and then there's breaking weight and torque weight. What does that mean? Can we feed it something? Breaking weight. The MoGraph weight map. Well, that's interesting. MoGraph weight map. I don't use that one too much. We have a MoGraph weight map. Well, okay, if we can apply weight that way, we don't need to do any of this espresso stuff. Oh, look at that. I kind of forgot there was a MoGraph weight map, to tell you the truth. I'm going to go and hide our sources. And now we have our MoGraph weight map. And that presumably, yes, indeed, it does use fields, which means we can hopefully apply a noise, a sudden flash of noise at a particular point, and suddenly lower the weight, which is pretty intriguing, honestly. All right, so by default, it should be, we're not feeding anything, so it's blank. If we say solid, then now, yes, they're all 100%. And if we feed this into our connector breaking weight, then that should become a multiplier on it. We can put on the torque weight as well. So right now, the hope is it looks exactly the same as it used to. Okay, that's fine. And now, what we can do is, if actually the most basic test we can do is, let's just say at frame 30, we're going to go from value 100 and go forward one frame, and we're going to go to value 0. So at frame 30, they should all suddenly break apart. Hey, look at that. Alrighty. We're making progress here. I did not know that was a thing. That should look kind of cool. Let's see. And then suddenly all the pieces go flying apart. That is awesome. I did not know you could do that. All right. So now we have a solid. We don't need to keyframe that. I'm going to put it back to always being 100%. But now we can do a flash of noise of some sort. Or if they go above a certain height, they'll suddenly break. So that's what we'll do. We'll make a folder. And in the folder, I'm going to make another random field. In fact, why don't we just steal this random field here. And I'm going to put that into the folder, but it's going to be a little bit different. Let's go ahead and make sure we take a look at it. Yeah, so we got this overall noise, but my thought is we're already doing this remapping. So if we go into our contour, if we map this up and then down, then we can get this stripe going. And it's going to be a three-dimensional stripe, and it could miss chunks, but doing something like that, actually we want the opposite. So I'm going to say invert. There we go. So now all these reds can suddenly flash through, and if it's caught in a section of red, it will suddenly break. And if we just do a quick flash of it, then I think it should remember. Now, or it could be once it gets up to a certain point. But I want to do a flash of it. But once it's hit, I guess once it's hit, it could just break or not break. So let's go ahead and just let it do that. I guess it's enabled or not enabled. So it's just kind of like boom, flash. So along those lines, I'm not going to, we're going to use signal here just because I can more parametrically do it. All I want to do is control this random field being on or not. Let's see, what's the best setting to do that? Basic, I guess we have enable. So I'm going to turn on the enable here, and let's go ahead and frame all. And I'm going to tell it that if it's above the 50% threshold, but that's 0 to 90, that's fine. I'm just going to say don't do anything. And then at about frame 30 again, we're going to have that shoot up. This is a terrible way to do it. I just want a single flash of it. Okay, sorry, signal. I'm not going to use you. So at frame 30, that will be turned on, keyframe. 1 frame earlier, it's turned off, keyframe. 2 frames later, it's turned off. So we're going to have a single frame in the middle where suddenly there's a flash of it's not, of that noise being activated. So in theory, that should be able to fly up, and then there's going to be a flash, and then some of it will break apart. And indeed, that is what we got. Working shockingly well. Explode, flash, a piece suddenly breaks apart. All right, so that's cool. Now we can push that potentially further. We could think of this a little bit differently as well by, instead of keyframing that, let's just animate the power or the remapping. So at any given moment, a piece could be getting affected by just being inside of this little wave. So I'm going to really make that skinny. So most of the time, these aren't going to be able to be affected. But every once in a while, they're going to pass through one of those. So they're always there. So when this breaks, they're going. But pretty much at any moment, some extra little pieces might decide to fly away. But they're kind of slowly passing through. And then what's happening is they're getting, presumably, you can see actually a couple of these little chunks being affected. It's like slightly breaking. So they're never quite getting a red, so I guess that's also a problem. Let's make sure that we actually give that a bit of range so we can actually get up to the full value. Probably want it to be pretty skinny, but if it's not enough to actually break all the way, that piece won't fly off. So let's see. It might go too much, but like a couple of these little random ones might fly away, but it's not remembering it when they're broken. So you can see here probably as they're flying through. Actually, you can see any given dot is stuck there. So that's not a world-based noise. So that's already by itself interesting. And also interesting is this noise does not exist in, it seems to only exist in object space, not local space. And I don't see any setting that changes that. Oh, space field global. There we go. That's all I was looking for. So as this goes and flies through, different chunks should pass through where those are. But I'm almost never, I would think that if that was working, I would think, is this turned on all the time? Yeah, it's enabled. I would think that as that explodes upward and it's passing through, we'd be seeing like little flashes of red as it passes through those high points. But that doesn't seem to be the case. I'm looking anywhere. Well, maybe I did see one little one. Give me a second to see if I see it again. Dang it. Hard to tell. So when in doubt, let's make it less subtle. So now they should explode. There's more chunks, but the hope is that we can see it maybe on this chunk to at some point see it just pass through. I was just hoping to see a red dot, like go boop, just turn on and off for a second, but I'm not seeing any, which is interesting. We're in space global. Now, I mean, it's simple. We could just animate the noise. We could just say animation speed, but that's not what I want. I want them to pass through cut points. So, and this, even this was just going to be a flash, so this already wasn't supposed to work all the way. It wasn't supposed to work all the way. But I thought we were going to have to use a decay to actually catch it. But it's not there. Just for fun, I'm going to give it some animation speed, and let's see if we do see them. Yeah, they do animate around. You see they each eventually, get disconnected. But why is, if we're set to global, why isn't it updating? Okay, I'm going to go real nuts on here. Only a few of them aren't going to be broken. So there's no way that could be missing. But it's still not updating. Now, I'm going to see if I can, maybe it's not update. Maybe it could be a bug, but maybe it's not updating. I'm going to force it to have a little bit of animation speed. Too slow to actually do something. That would be forcing a refresh. Ah. See, I know the way they think sometimes. I just made an assumption the way that the German programmers might program. It wasn't behaving the way logically it should be behaving. So I was like, well, maybe if there's no animation speed, then it doesn't have to refresh. So I just gave it a tiny, tiny bit of animation speed, the slowest possible, which effectively means there's none. But if you see, as I go frame by frame by frame, different ones are lighting up and turning off, which means by putting a tiny bit of animation speed, we've now forced it to be like, oh, I might be animated, check and refresh. And now, thus, as they fly up through the air, they are blinking on and off like stoplights, which is what I was originally looking for. So, with that now working, we can pinch this really small. So most of the time that's not happening, and they should only occasionally fly through something to break. And when they fly through something to break, we want it to remember that. So what I'm going to do is create a decay, and the decay is going to do an effect strength, and it's trying to find the maximum. But I think we want to remember the minimum. So if ever it becomes dark, it should stay dark. So there, boom, you see slowly they're all turning red. And that automatically is fun, but they're passing through very quickly. So now we really need to go back to what I was originally doing, which is this becomes incredibly skinny. So there's very little chance that it's actually ever going to catch a point. But, I mean, these will be additive very quickly. You see it's going to travel upward, and as it goes, more and more of those connections will fail. And eventually there could be a cut through it, and then that would eventually break into some multiple. Yeah, and you see it did eventually pass through enough of them to be broken into additional pieces. Boom. So, wow, yeah, we'd have to go real thin, but the concept is totally working. It's broken or it's not, and yeah, it's pretty solid. What is spline range? Whoa, that's interesting. Spline offset. I'm not quite sure what that means, but it's interesting. Let's see. What is actually the best way of just getting that tiny little cut point in there? I'm not sure, but these are annoying me, so I'm going to make a linear spline instead. Let's go ahead and flatten those out a bit. And now we can more properly make a fall off. And even that, like, okay, that looks good, and we get that really thin section, but what would be even better is pinch that off, let that be really tiny and tight, so we can really get precise with that wedge. And they're almost never crossing that threshold, but we have to keep in mind that the that was signal that was going to be doing the cutoff. But yeah, that's just applying a weight, and the weight is how strong it is, which becomes fractional. So if it ever does get up to that peak, it'll go. So there's actually another additive way. These will often go through and then get a partial break. They'll get, well, not partially, but they'll become weaker, but they're not fully weak. Once they go red, they just have to full on break. But yeah, we can go and let those slowly break. And really, I want to keep making this more and more subtle, where there should be almost no breaks whatsoever. We could zoom up on this. Not something I typically do, but we can zoom up on that and really start pinching that in. The lines become very small, increasingly unlikely that they pass through. It's going to take a while for, yeah, you see these chunks are maintaining pretty well until that finally broke. This one is stuck together pretty well until it starts finally breaking the pieces. So that starts looking a little bit better. We get those nice big chunks on the initial one. As they're flying up, they're passing through and getting weaker as they pass through that noise. So yeah, that's actually working kind of exactly the way I want it to. So that's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and give that a save as number 2. And I'm quite pleased with that. Hi there, everybody. Hey, Zach, thanks for making it. Thanks for jumping and supporting on Patreon, like everybody else here is. Dane, quick question. I'm seeing some extra names here I don't usually see. So am I, is this public on YouTube? Because it wasn't supposed to be. It's cool if it is, but it's not supposed to be. But in any case, let's keep going. We got more. That's actually going really well. And we were going to try to do the fancy espresso setup, but now we're getting this really great break, and we're able to have those chunks break apart more and more and more. And I just had no idea that we could apply a weight to it. In fact, I haven't really tinkered around with the concept of MoGraph weight tags in general. So it's like a it says a vertex map for MoGraph, but that's really, really, really powerful. So I have to keep that in mind. That might even change the way I did a couple of things in the new tutorial. So I'll just have to keep that in mind. But that's cool. All right, now, what do we do? What's the next challenge of what I wanted to do here? Honestly, maybe it would be jumping into some X particle stuff here, because what I want to have happen is, first of all, I'm going to stop colorizing our fragment so that just looks nice and flat. We get to get the chunks flying. So we get that going. But what I would like to do, and it's definitely something I didn't end up getting to do in the tutorial, because like I said, the tutorial is already 2.5 hours long. But I'd like to have happen is when these chunks actually break away, I'd love to have some particles fall out. Now, there's no way to do, well, you might be able to do it with thinking particles, but who wants to do that? And it's funny because I'm probably, in all the people in the world, I probably have more kind of old knowledge about thinking particles than most people, and I don't ever want to touch it. But we do have X particles, so we can start tinkering around and having some particles generate where the breaks are. The tricky part is how do we can limit X particles to only spitting out on certain selections, I think. That should be relatively straightforward. But how do we do it where it's kind of only that moment of breaking? I don't kind of think about that. An email notification. A notification on YouTube. It might be, you know what, that's fine. Yeah, Jenny's, that's true. People will know what they're missing out on for the bonus stream, which is just me trying to learn different chunks of cinema for the most part and experimenting here and having people ask questions and guide it along a little bit. But yeah, I think it's because when it got created, it was still set to public, and when I went live, that email probably went out with a link, and then I went and set it to not public, but it's too late. The email went out, but that's cool. I like having a couple extra people hanging out. And once again, I guess for anybody who is hanging out right now, this is, if you're supporting on Patreon at the technician level or above, then I do this every week, every Thursday. I do the normal show on every Wednesday for 2.5 hours, usually these days. I usually go over. But this is the special secret bonus one. But in any case, I want to have particles emit from where the breaks happen when they break. And that's the tricky part. So, here is my, well, let's get the basic version working and make sure that I can do it at all. I'm going to just make an emitter, and we can emit from emission is set to rate, but I'm going to set it to, we can say trigger controlled. It's under object. I don't want to emit from a rectangle. I want to emit from an object. And on the object, we can feed it a selection. And I'm not sure if the selection is a selection tag. I'm going to say I want these to emit from the polygon area, and I'm going to assume that the selection is a selection tag. Let's go ahead and put the fracture object in, and I'm going to tell the fracture object to show our inside faces. So that means that this selection tag is every single polygon that's on the inside. In fact, just so we can see it really clearly, let's make a texture tag here. And I'm going to make it bright red. And I'm going to tell that to only show up where those faces are. So X particles should only appear anywhere where these breaks happen. So, or yeah, these cracks. So let's just turn off the emitter for a moment. Hit play. And I can see that all the internals are red. And the hope would be that we are emitting particles from all of those selections. I don't know if that is a thing. Let's hit play. It's definitely taking a little bit to calculate, but let's see what we get. Well, we've got some particles around. Let's make them more visible. Let's go ahead to display. I'm going to make them bright orangey, and let's change them to be circles. So let's see, those are emitting. Even now the way they're emitting is quite strange to me. It's over there, it's over there, it's over there, but it's not everywhere. But let's go ahead and make it so that they are not moving. So we're going to give them a speed of 0 and not a full lifespan. They'll only live for 90 frames. Didn't I just say speed of 0? Did I not rewind all the way? What? Speed of 0. Why? What did I just do? Also, oh, that's the icon color. I want the particle color. But if I just told them speed of 0, does wind? Oh, they might be being affected by the wind. Modifiers. Only use modifiers. I'm going to say deformers. It's probably counting that. So I think it's looking at the wind. No, well, okay, it still might be looking at the wind, but I'm going to say include particle modifiers. Yeah, I think the wind was blowing them up. Yeah, there we go. All right, interesting. Very interesting. What are we seeing here? We definitely see, they seem to be cycling through the individual chunks. Sam, yeah, this is supposed to be for patrons only, but it's a special, but I messed up the link, or I messed up hiding it, so it's cool. It's not the first time it's happened, so it's just a special sneak preview then for the few people who were paying attention. But anyway, X particles, we are emitting from particle direction normal, stick particle to source object. No, we don't need that. Chain object, any object. I want it to be all the objects. Chain, object chain. Is it viewing this as an object chain and it's saying to emit from any of the objects? I'm going to say connect the objects, which should frame by frame kind of view them as one mesh is my guess. Okay, that's already looking better because you see we have a sprinkle of particles all over the place. Yeah, that seems better. I'm not 100% sure, but that might be more what we're looking for. Now, we're not emitting that many particles, so let's go ahead and make it 10 times as many, and I'm going to make them not live for very long. Let's make them only live for 10 frames, or 11, because it's quicker to type. So let's see, we're going to have a bunch more particles, but they'll keep dying, and the hope would be that kind of everywhere on the edges here, although they seem to calculate 1 frame later. They seem to calculate 1 frame later, so it's a little difficult to tell. I'm going to tell them they'll only live for 2 frames. I mean, it does seem to be doing it. It's just so visually difficult to tell exactly what it's doing. Um, there's a surface break edges selection as well. Surface break edges. What is a surface? Well, it's an edge. Surface break edges. I mean, that would create along the edges up on the top and along the edges along the bottom, I'm assuming, which is cool. But that I'm not. I'm just looking to do it from the surface of those. I mean, we could do it on the those. That's a valid thing. Although I don't know if I can see if X particles would be doing that. Oh wait, I can't delete that. I have to turn it off. That's not the goal. I mean, we could limit it there, but the more of the goal is, well, right now I just want to make sure that the X particles are emitting from it. It's a little difficult to tell. Although we might be able to tell better if we tell the emitter to stick it to the source object. That's a good idea. So now those are, at a given frame, would hopefully be stuck right on the edge. But it does seem to be calculating like one frame late. So it seems to like lag a frame behind. Is that something we can deal with? The chain of objects, we told it to connect it, which is cool. They're emitting from the polygon area, which is what I want. We can tell it to go from, oh, the selection. Oh, did I? Inside faces. Looks like we lost the selection. Maybe when I just clicked edges, I just lost it. It should be inside faces. Yeah, they're not there, and I'm also telling it to stick to the surface. Aki, that's a decent idea. We can bake our sim and then see if it's working. Let's go ahead and bake our dynamics. Shouldn't take too long. Actually, let's turn off the X particle emitter, and it should go real quick. So let's say cache. Let's save our scene file and bake it. I'm gonna go pretty quick through there. Ding, 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 ding. All right, so now that's there. Now we can turn on our XP emitter again, hit play, and let's see if they actually stick to the surface. Now that's baked. And you know, that's not an unreasonable thing, but, well, no, they don't, they, again, don't seem to be on the exact frame. Speed of 0, origin offset, topography local, initial state. Yeah, I'm not sure. It's a little bit weird. Now, if we hit play from the top view, yeah, we should, well, yeah, you can see that the particles are only appearing on the little slices in between. So that's cool. Mm, Well, yeah, Zach is saying we could do a shot, which is a fine way of visualizing it, but let's do a single shot count of, let's say, 4,000 particles. Shot time, duration is 1. And I think we turn off per frame. I only want a single shot one time. And now we can have them live for the full frame. Am I doing that right? Shot time, duration 1. I'm going to lower the particle count just to make sure it's not insane. Okay, well, now we can see that they are indeed not sticking, and it might be because the geometry is being recalculated every time. It's entirely possible that sticking them to the surface is incompatible with the idea of connecting to the object. That almost makes a certain level of like coding sense. because it might be treating these all like they're a connect object, and that means it's just connecting every single frame. It means we can't stick, but I don't want it. I don't. That's just a way of visualizing. I don't actually want to stick. I just wanted to make sure that they were spawning in between. But that's all good, and we don't actually need them to stick to it. But what I do want is I only want them to break when we see one of our chunks break, when we see one of those fly away. So that part is more challenging, but I don't think it's not impossible. And I think what we need to do to make this happen would be to make a new selection tag. There might be fancy ways of doing it inside of X particles directly, but if we stick within the realm of fields, let's go ahead and make ourselves. This is a. I don't even know if that's a real selection tag, but if we make a. How do I create a selection tag on this object? Create. Oh, come on. I just want to make a selection tag. Create a selection tag. There we go. And now can I put that there? Yes. Okay. That was way too difficult. Okay, so now we got this selection tag. Now what I'm going to do is say use fields, and I'm going to tell it to generate the selection based on whatever those are. So this should just be trying to find the nearest, or we can even say the index of the polygons. And with any luck, that is just kind of working. Now we can prove if that's working by telling this red material to be viewing that polygon selection. So if those are still red on the inside, it's working. They are not red on the inside, so that's not working. Interesting. So let's say nearest instead. Yeah, ooh, okay, interesting. The tricky part here is I'm not surprised, but I don't think the selection tag knows how to hold. It can't hold a selection because this isn't a polygon object. If it's not a polygon object, it doesn't have like an index set, and thus we can't apply anything to it because there's no relevant information for it to be storing. This version of the selection tag, I think, is not like a normal one. So that is interesting. It's not wrong, but it does make things a little difficult. How do we do it? Because the particles aren't sticking. This is a fun challenge. I like this, but there's a lot of different ways to approach it. And then when those break, we have all the different breaks, but we can't get the positional information of those breaks from the connect object. If we say tell this to use fields, what does it do? I would almost imagine that it says we can use fields, but I don't think this is a selection tag that filters down through all the rest of them. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean I want to make a linear field and move that around. Yeah, see, this is not behaving at all the same way. As I move this linear field inside of our selection tag, it's not. It should be erasing out some of these polygons, but it's not. So we can't trust this selection tag as anything except for raw reference to what the code of the fracture is spitting out. I don't know what the right way to say of what they were doing there, but I understand how and why. So those polygons are moving and being told to connect so they can generate particles every single frame if we wanted them to, which is cool. But we only want them where they have broken. I'm trying to think, there's no way of getting a speed from it. except from the entire clone. But the velocity of a clone doesn't give us a selection of said polygons. Does not give a selection. Hello. For new people, I'm trying. We've got this groundbreaking part. We already figured out how to do some MoGraph weight tags to make things continue breaking. But what I'm trying to do is make it so X particles emits particles only from the edges, but not. We've got it working from the edges, but we want to only come from the edge, kind of on the moment that it breaks or moves away. So I'm trying to think of what kind of data we have access to. We can't get a particle to stick to the surface. If we could, then we could kind of stick a particle all over the place, and those become source points. And depending on how fast they're moving, we could then make things happen. But they won't stick because we're connecting all of our different objects together. That doesn't work. I mean, we could just do. I mean, maybe. Well, I don't know. I mean, there's the brute force method. Um, Jenny's, I do have a big full tutorial coming out maybe next week or the week after that is going to be involved in doing this type of stuff. So keep an eye out for that. But, I mean, the simple method, and the simple method is not necessarily that simple, but we could just do a whole bunch of emitting of particles. We can emit a whole bunch of particles during the early part, but that doesn't make it so that every time there's a break, a couple extra particles fly out, which is what I'd really like. But if you were doing kind of this big initial explosion where these are breaking in the very beginning, we could just make it so that it's generating a whole bunch of particles throughout this entire process, and they're living. Maybe not for the entire timeline, but let's make them live for maybe 90 frames, variation 35 frames. And this will just make a nice, constant rain of particles coming from every single crack. But you see, even there, that's less of what I want because I want them to be from the edges. We have a bunch of dust coming from the edges. What are we missing there? I'm going to turn on motion inheritance. With any luck, with these moving, those will move with it. We'll get them being flung in the same direction. And they actually do seem to inherit, so that's something. Turning that on was good. We're even still baked, so that's not working. Just for it won't stick. We can't stick. I'm pretty sure. I don't think Bob is still actively in the chat, but I'm pretty sure that by telling the emitter to the object chain, because it was viewing an entire chain of object in the fracture, by telling it to connect, it is now a mesh that's updating every single frame, which means it can't stick. They could stick potentially if we just had to use the first object or the last object. Yeah, that would be a heavy sim if we had a ton of particles emitting that way. Definitely not what I want. I mean, I really, all I want to see really is where we have exposed chunks to have a whole bunch of particles be able to come out from it. I'm going to go, it's pretty much worthless, but I'm going to go, let's add a gravity in here. I just want to render and just take a look at what it's doing, but let's put in a modifier, motion, gravity, so those should start falling with any luck. And the emitter, I did tell it to have modifiers only include, so I'm going to say go ahead and exclude, so now it should be seeing deformers and effectors, particle modifiers. You know what? I don't trust it, so I'm just going to go ahead and say include that particle modifier. So now these should be getting affected by these exploding upward with gravity. exploding upward, getting their velocity, but then gravity will take over and then they can start falling. So we can do that as a basic little something there. We can also make it so that, well, I'm not even going to bother making those dynamic. And the quickest way, we're probably just going to put X particles material on there so it renders really quick. And we'll tell it to make a bunch of particles. So let's go 10 times as many. We'll create a new X particles. I mean, there's the gaseous material. But no, the gaseous material is for, yeah, the more complicated sims. We'll throw that on there. We're going to keep it real simple. I'm just going to change the color. It's a color of the particle, but I'm going to change the color to single color, and we're just going to make it red. And honestly, that's kind of all. I just want to see what it looks like in more real time as those explode upward. Render, and yeah, we see this big, crazy trail of particles, but they're never, they're always a frame behind. Always a frame behind. Always a frame, always a frame, always a frame behind. What did this originally say? Use any object, so it was randomly going between them. Let's go see what that does again. Yeah, see it says go, oh, particle, 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 particle. And then they're going to be left behind and fall. And you see we're getting almost a perfect outline. But I don't know this, but if I said stick particle to source object, I'm curious if those would actually stay stuck. Nope. Even that doesn't work. The particle direction is set to normal. I'm going to go ahead and give it a little bit of speed. So maybe they will travel off the surface a little bit. But not really. It's going to look weird, but let's just go ahead and send that picture viewer. We get that for free. I guess we should say all frames. Boom. We'll let that chug away a little bit. Aki, I don't think so. X-particle sims don't behave dramatically differently if you cache them. They're just kind of there or not. But you see, like, this is where, maybe the, like, while the particles aren't right up here, when you play it at speed, it's still working pretty well. These are clearly flying. They clearly have the acceleration of the overall object. So, like, that's working surprisingly well. We're just not seeing them. They're lagging that little bit behind. I do stick. No, they're going to be changing. They're not changing. The frustrating part a little bit is the yeah, you can see here actually at near the end, you can see the particles being generated from that edge, and they're just raining off of it really well. That's what I want to have happen, but that's only working because those aren't moving. When this is moving at speed, they're that little bit behind. Yeah, you see this should be emitting particles, and it is, but they're way behind. They're never right on it. And even with motion inheritance on, linear direction, I don't know what special blend means. I was going to say we could put this in the connect object because technically our point counts aren't changing. That's the part that's a little upsetting here, is our point counts don't change. Like, it's not like this is automatically creating new chunks. All those different chunks appear there all the time. Sam, you're just, did I check the project settings? Like, what would the project settings tell me? Like, okay, here I am in the project settings, but that's unless you have a very specific setting, it's like, oh, you're missing this. Then that's just a shot in the dark, and that way lies madness. We need, I need, at least what I'm going to actually execute on screen has to be an informed guess at the least. One last thing I did want to do is put a MoGraph cache on here. So now we can bake that MoGraph cache based off of the dynamics cache. So that should be doing that. And in theory, we should be able to go to our dynamics body and completely get rid of it. If I move it off the object, and now it's not doing anything. And now all the motion we're seeing is coming from MoGraph calculations, or just this baked thing. So it's pretty much like it's keyframed. And now we can see if the particles are doing anything. Nope, still seeming to behave the same way. And then I could make a connect object and don't weld, and then that's not changing point count anymore. And we put that in the connect object, and that's all being connected. And then we can tell X particles to view the connect object. The good old when in doubt, use a connect object. But I don't see any reason why that would change anything. Although it does seem to run a lot quicker. Look at that, it runs way faster. That's bizarre. We were already cached, but now, let's just say use first object, because it is only one object. Yeah, that's way quicker. I'm not sure why. Something that's something interesting to keep in mind, but why? Shablams. Send that to pitch view again. I don't think we're seeing anything different, but we've now baked everything down as much as we possibly can, and still in a way to make it think that should be being treated as one object. We can just see these particles passing right through the object. That's not surprising, but they're not generating from the surface. That's the bad part here. And honestly, we can't even get them to emit properly from the edge as these pieces fly away and around. Still pretty cool, though. Yep, they're not there on the edge. But we didn't even get to the point where we were going to try and make it only emit from the edges that had broken apart. We didn't even get there. We're just trying to emit from... I mean, you could just move forward ignoring that element of it, because these do get left behind pretty well. I mean, it's still working well, but we do... The actual tricky part, the next part that we'd want to figure out is the particles only emitting from the frames that we want them to. And that is the actual part that I'm really intrigued, because there's a lot of really fun potential, but we can't get particles to stick. So how do we get information for what's actually exposed, especially since we have the selection tag, and that's fine. But there was no way of... There's no way of getting additional information. And it even goes to the point where we couldn't even make a duplicate of it to store the different points and polygons. Bob, I think literally I tried to do that. Generate from an unwelded connect. That's what I'm doing. This is a unwelded connect. And that's what we're generating from. And then I said stick to source active. And we definitely, I thought, did that. So we are saying stick to source object based on the normal. And I'm even saying use first object now, or we can say, I think the default is any object, but now it's only one object, so it should be able to do that. But when we run on it, it runs nice and. Oh wait, why is it suddenly working? Did we not do that combination? Did I turn off stick? Literally, we did every combination there except maybe we didn't have the connect. But now they're freaking stuck to the surface. All right, well, never mind. Thanks, Bob. I seriously, I thought we did that one. I said, well, that didn't work. We have to move on. But now it is working. So, all right. Well, then now it's trivial because now that just totally works. And now those are all stuck on the edges, and now we can emit from those surfaces. And those are stuck really nicely there. But that still doesn't stop the next part of the problem. And Bob, I don't know if you have any idea here. What I want to do is have them not emit from everywhere. I want them to only emit from where they're kind of open air, where they're stuck here. But I don't want these inner ones emitting. I only want where the cracks formed for them to be what's emitting. So we got these points that we can emit from. So those become emission points, which is cool. But how do we make it so that either we're only stuck on the outside edges, or now that we have particles on the outside, which gives us a lot more options because there's actually particles to work from, how do we make it so that those... I guess nothing's jumped in my head, but we have information now, and the information is we have these particles and they're stuck to a surface, or we have that selection where they're on that surface. But what makes this surface different from one of these interior ones? Unless we find something to key off of, unless we have some parameter that gives us some sort of additional variation or something to key off of, then we don't have anything. And right now, the only thing I can think of is a particle's proximity to other particles, but like so that face being on the opposite one, but that doesn't really make sense to me. That doesn't do anything. So how do you make it so if they're exposed to air? Yeah, well now Bob's going off on data mapping in the spawn modifier using the distance to the nearest particle. Yeah, so that's kind of what I was just saying. Unfortunately, you guys are 30 seconds in the past when you see my video. So yeah, you're going on the same thing, which is we have a distance that we can work from. Now, we have that whole series of connectors, and we have the field. Something that would be really cool is if we could get a radius from a broken part. So if a connector is treated as broken, then that becomes some sort of fall off, but we'd also want to potentially associate it with, if it's broken on an edge, that's really weird. These being on the edge, though, is really cool. I can't believe we were like just one checkbox away from it, and we were even using stick particle earlier. Look how fast that runs, though. It's pretty crazy. I mean, it's baked now, so the dynamics aren't calculating, but it's still cool. Think. Zach, I don't think the object chain has any effect on it anymore because we're only feeding it one object, and that only cares probably if we had something like a null. If this was any object, then it would be going through the entire hierarchy of objects, or the fracture object here was a whole hierarchy of objects, so that was where it's choosing which one to go through. So any object or first object or connect objects all should behave identically in this circumstance, but connect, and maybe connect object would be different, but now we're manually connecting, so we don't even need to worry about that. I guess I'm more like I don't have any expectations that X particles should be able to do that. So it really does go back to fields, and we could create. We can't create a vertex map on the connect object, but we might be able to put one on a Hmm. They're not individually active. Vertex map each one. Well, okay, I got some weird thoughts. This is super roundabout, but connect object is not doesn't have points. It's not editable, so we can't work from its points in a vertex map kind of way. But a correction deformer, I think, can have a vertex map applied. So we put that on there, and now we have this kind of made editable version of it, which I think means we can put. I could select it and say, now let's put a vertex weight on it of 0. So now we have a vertex map. And now that vertex map, what can we do with that? We can probably also, apparently there's polygons on that, so we could do a polygon selection. So we have a polygon selection, which what I want to do is select everything, or what would be awesome, but it won't work, but what would be awesome is if we could turn on fields and feed in that one, and then that would limit to the index of it. But we can clearly see that that's not working. Yeah, if I do that and double click, it's like, nope, it even turned red, saying that something bad about that. Nearest, double click, nothing. Yeah, so we can't use that data from it. So okay, that's interesting. But we do have this correction deformer, and we are able to put on vertex maps and selections and whatnot. So let me make sure that's working. If I make a linear field here, and we now have that linear field, then the hope would be that if I double click on that, yeah, you see this now. This at least is giving us information. This is now the linear field is selecting those polygons, or it could be selecting in the vertex map. So that's something. It's more than what we could get out of the fracture tags information. So correction deformer is going a long way. Now we could select every. We could do a selection of all the polygons, and that becomes a selection, and we can drag them in. What I would love to do is select all the polygons, and even that we can just say select them all by, let's make a solid. So putting a solid in there, I think it means all of them are selected. Let me double check by doing that, and then that. Okay, cool. So those are all selected all the time. Cool. Now we make a second selection tag, and this second selection tag is just going to be fed the original one. But the original one is trying to find the nearest polygon. But if instead of nearest, we said, I want to see the average, and now we get a distance. And now if we said a distance of something probably small, probably arbitrarily small, if it is an average of that, but if it's, oh man. Well, actually, that's already interesting. You see, we got something of an interesting selection there. My thought would be is if we're crossing a certain tolerance here, then oh, that's interesting. That doesn't seem to have much of an effect. If we let me change the radius and see if that, yeah, it does change the selection. My thought was if we, yeah, it's already proving not to be the case. But I was hoping that because one polygon is flat up against another, if the two of them are kind of facing each other, and then they get the weight of one, so this would be an average of them, then we could say we get half the weight from one, half of the weight of the other. But if the weight is at 50%, that means it's by itself. And if it's by itself, then that becomes something relevant. And this is already a really weird rig, but that's pretty neat. But yeah, that's not working. And we can do a maximum radius, but that's just gonna, this is just gonna select for tiny polygons or possibly large ones. at the maximum size, and then we can say a minimum size, which I almost think would be the opposite. No, it seems to just be a little bigger. Um, well, let's see. Yeah, when this explodes, what's cool is you see that this indeed is deforming along with us. So that part is neat. Although it does seem to almost weld everything. Mapping nearest normal UV. Maybe UV is the way to go. The problem is yeah, it's not. I can't think of any way of combining this. If we do a minimum or a maximum or an average, none of these are actually going to grab all the polygons except for the outer ones. Yeah, even here you can see that, well, we got selected at the top and not these outer ones. And some of these inner ones are selected, but they're not. I don't feel like this is overly coherent. Think, do, 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 do. Almost, we're so close with this, almost doing something. The only other thing that's popping into my head, which is really goofy, would be if we could detect via like ambient occlusion, because these wouldn't be getting ambient occlusioned. So if that was limited to a selection, and if we fed into X particles a ambient occlusion shader of some sort. Now there's no field that deals with that kind of thing. Sam, that's an interesting idea. Constantly creating particles, but if they're inside of the overall object, it kills them. But because here they're outside the object a little bit, it doesn't kill them. It's an interesting idea. I do like it, actually. It's a completely different process than the way I was just going, but I do kind of want to try that now. That's a really good idea. Now, can we have the particle appear a little outside the surface? Right now, oh, offset origin. So if I said offset by, not even much, let's just offset by 1. And we don't need our connection deformer right now. If we offset by 1, then the hope would be, let's go ahead and make these really tiny for a moment. Offset origin of 2, and then emission radius of 1. Display. That's a radius of 1, so I don't know if that'll work. Yeah, they're still, it's hard to tell, but they still seem to be in the surface. So I can go further. Is it going the wrong direction, or is that just not working at all? Or does stick to surface? Stick to surface might make it stick to the surface. Like it can't be stuck a little bit of a direction away. Is my thought. So if that's already touching the surface, it's either inside here or it'd be intersecting the opposite side and thus be getting deleted. Now we could emit a bunch of particles, and then the ones that are spawning off of it, those could work. Seems dangerous. Let me think. Yeah, so it's emitting. Well, let's just try putting the kill on there. And is this constantly emitting? Yeah, it's set to a rate. It's supposed to be making a bunch. So maybe there's always this many as long as it gets it. I'm not sure if these, when you stick particles, I don't know if it keeps on making more and more and more. But let's go ahead and try and make a kill. XP kill, and the if it's kill it if it's inside the bounds of a box or a sphere. We don't want that. We want a volume. So we might need to do an object. We might need to do a question. So I'm going to go to question, add a question. If the particle position is inside the volume of the connect object, add an action, and the action is to kill it. Although, let's just change the group. That should be a little bit easier to see. Yeah, I want to be able to see it. It looks like, Sam, you're saying there's some way to do it with the other one, but I'm going to continue with this method for a moment. So let's go ahead and say I want to do a direct action, and that is to change the group, and now we need to make a new group. Looks like I have to make one. Where are the groups? XP group. Let's make a dark blue. It should stand out a lot. No speed, radius of 5. That should really stand out. So if they are being affected, this should pretty blatantly happen. So change group. They should change to group affected, particle chain, particle group, and then change the color and the editor display. That's fine. So, oh yeah, and I want this question to be answered over and over and over again. Okay, so we can see all these tiny blue dots, and I guess we needed to set that to circles. Boom. All of those are being treated like they're inside the volume. It looks like a couple of these outer ones survived. Which is odd, but as we keep on moving forward, I'd want to keep on creating more, so maybe we just need to kill and see if more get spawned. So, yeah, I guess we'll turn off the change group action, and we'll kill it. If it's inside the volume, we'll add an action. The action will be a direct action. Would it be a modifier action? The modifier being kill modifier. All right. So now we're saying if it's inside, kill it. So now those should be dying. Hard to tell. Let's go ahead and also change the group. If those are supposed to be getting killed, if they're supposed to be getting killed, why are they not dead? That's the action, kill if they're inside. Now, they were turning blue, which means they're inside of it. The kill action, that's the kill modifier. We don't need that, right? It's just a direct action. Unless we need that, add the modifier. Maybe it needs to exist to kill it. Well, now I'm just confused. I'm just confused now. I'm going to back off the kill modifier, and let's go back to directly trying to apply the kill. As you were saying, there was a way to do that. There should be a way. Control, kill, and then you said objects. Oh, there we go. So volume, I don't know how I missed that, but okay, object. So if only born if it's outside or inside. So if it's outside, if it's inside, kill. So this should just be constantly killing particles. How do we even know if that's working? I guess we can tell by doing a burst of particles. Or are these all being born outside? And then there's even potentially a problem because we get all these little cracks being generated, and then you can particles can survive in there. Clearly, there's a lot of them. And once again, that's happening because we can't be offset from our surface a little bit. Now, having said that, we are a fairly parametric setup here, and we've got our connect object. Can we make an instance of that? That would be weird, but maybe. Oh, it's definitely getting confused, so. Yeah, I don't trust that at all. Don't trust it. Yeah, Sam, I agree. They'd have to be a little bit away from the surface, but I can't move them. If they're sticking to the surface, they have to move a little bit away. Bob, you're saying it's working. Am I doing something wrong here? I'm saying look at the connect, delete them if they're on the inside. Oh, also, I forgot. I keep forgetting the modifier. I said it has to include certain things. Yeah. That might have been, I forgot to include it into the modifier list. Because I have this wind blowing upward. So, they definitely are occasionally existing. Well, they're existing on the inside. It's hard to tell. And then if they're outside, here's the tricky part, is they're being calculated, they're being generated so that some are outside, some are inside. So I got a handful here who are like, oh, okay, well, I'm outside, so I'm not getting deleted. But everything else is getting deleted. What am I missing? There's also the particle flags, particle fluid, geometry, physical data. I think that's all the mass and everything, yeah. Other age group, radius, speed, time and group. So the tricky part here is you can clearly see that I got a bunch of particles living inside various parts here. And that should mean that they're on the outside, but the cracks are forcing them to be inside of that radius. What I'd really... Bob, is there any way of sticking a particle but emitting it so it's kind of floating a little bit away from the surface, or is it literally stuck to the surface? Because if I can't have that be out just a tiny little bit, enough to pass through the wall of the opposite one, then it just seems it even just seems weird that some of these particles survive and some don't, which means when it's telling it to stick to the surface, it's not actually sticking to the surface. It's slightly in or it's slightly out. Otherwise, why would some be getting deleted and some are not getting deleted? That confuses me. So then it goes to like, well, how can we offset from that a little bit? Now we could just keep on emitting, or we could, we can generate the particles on the surface and then have it have a different subemitter and they're all emitting, and then those will float away. But if they find out they're inside of a piece of geometry, they won't get generated. So that's kind of a way of getting the offset because it's just a new particle. But that would mean there's a lot of particles being born that are invalid, and then they get deleted, but they still got born and deleted. So that feels redundant. And then we'd have the other ones floating away. From there, and I'm not sure if that's what you put together, Bob, or not. Tricky one. But with them being directly on the surface, also, well, they should be getting. I don't know how the way the kill works, or we have a rate, so the constant rate of them being generated. So if we had a very low birth rate and a bunch of them are dying, do they keep on getting generated? Like, when it gets killed, do new ones get to generate? Actually what's actually happening there? It'll always be stuck to the surface. Can you try putting the original geometry in the kill, not the connector, the Voronoi? Aki, that is what I was trying to do when I made the instance of it. And that bit's a little confusing, or it's something we could potentially try, but yeah, when it comes to just the emitter count, I'm a little fuzzy on the way that this overall rig is going to deal with that. It does seem to populate the new ones if I add the additional number. We could try inflating, generate it from one, delete them from another. That would be weird. Like, well, you can't generate from a connect that's internal, can we? That'd be weird. It's worth an experiment. But if we put the connect into a connect and don't weld it, so we have them emitting from that one. Let's see if they still emit successfully from there. So yeah, okay, they're now emitting successfully from here still. Their X particles is still referencing that one. But now, unrelated to it, let's go ahead and make a plane effector. Wait, does that even make sense? Oh, wait, it does make sense. We want, yeah, this makes sense. I'm just doing it a little backwards. So I'm going to create a MoGraph plane effector. And I'm going to tell it to behave like a deformer based off the polygons. And I want it to push on, it's going to, yeah, see, this is inflating it slightly. So you can see we're actually inflating that additional layer. So it's going to get fatter and fatter and fatter. Each piece gets bigger. So we only have to go a little bit. Let's just do one. So it's, even that's potentially a little too big. But we're just inflating it by one. And now let's tell the emitter to not emit from the inner connect, but from the outer inflated connect. And now we'll tell the kill is still referencing the uninflated one. Okay, this is weird, but let's see if that does anything. Hard to tell. Let's change our display mode to, no, not skeleton, wireframe, and lines. Well, we still have a lot of internal particles, so it's not entirely working. It's not working at all as far as I can tell. Let's wait a second. So you can see a bunch of particles there. Actually, this is interesting because look, you see particles are trying to get created, but they're getting destroyed really quickly. And then when this flies away, suddenly more particles are being born. And in theory, we've probably got a bunch of cracks in there. So if we tell the plane effector to inflate even more, so we'll push those further into the other ones, then there's less of a threshold for them to be existing on the interior. And oh, Visually a little difficult. See that? I mean, these do seem pretty empty, but then the outsides don't seem incredibly populated. So, like some of these outside chunks definitely have like almost none, but that should be fully covered given the condition. But maybe we just aren't throwing enough particles out there, or maybe when they find a valid surface, they stick to it. In which case, we'd need to be constantly replenishing it with more particles. So if we lower the lifespan, they'd constantly be having to replenish themselves. Um, so if that's constantly replenishing, then they're only working on the outer ones. These interiors do seem quite empty. Some of them, but some of them are still weld the kill volume. I don't think we want to weld anything. Each of these is individually inflated, and they are closed surfaces. The edges are already welded. So a lot of those seem okay, but not all of them. You can see here, is there just a big gap? Like, why is that? See, that one's really thin. So how are any particles surviving in there if it's passing through the geometry into the other objects? I don't even know for sure that this double connect trick is actually working, but it does seem to be working, which is crazy. We need to be constantly replenishing our particle count, so in theory they should be dying all the time and then being born again in only valid places. Let's see, that one's got enough of a gap where I would imagine it could sneak through. I mean, how far do we have to go with that? I'm just going to go overboard. Now, if we go too far, you can see that we're going to start getting a little extra gaps that are pushing on the outside, but it would be something. So that starts messing up our original geometry quite a bit. And let's go back to viewing our wireframe. And the G is a shortcut. I don't use it too often, so I can never remember that one. Are we seeing the particles before they're killed? I don't think so. I think that it's pretty much instant. Because, yeah, we should be able to see here on the base, if we go one frame in before much happens, you see a bunch of particles were created, and these seem to be the survivors. Yeah, the way these particles are being generated, it's really hard to tell, but even here with this one pushing out, a bunch of these particles are here, in which case you would think those would survive. Sam, you're saying offset origin is working? Let's save this as another file. I mean, if what you're saying is accurate, oh, that plane effector seems to deform our original geometry as well. Brink. Put that up a layer. No, that didn't work at all. You're saying that if we emit from the original connect object and you're offsetting from origin, I'm going to go overboard. Let's do like 15. That's quite a bit now. That they do successfully offset, and then it will get killed by being inside of another object. So let's go find a, so these are pushing quite a bit away. They should be. But you can see here that these are not floating far away from the surface. They are right smack dab on the surface. So that's where you're losing me, Sam. They are not they're not actually pushed away. So if they're not pushed away, how could they then get fed in? That doesn't make sense to me. Now that could be, once again, I never said that this wouldn't work for emission. Those should all have normal directions and they're all facing outside, which means if we make a second emission, so if we tell this emitter to start emitting by adding in a question, and I always forget how to make a second, or an emitter, make more emitters. Particle data, particle fluid, other. Oh, that's a question. Age is just always. Yeah, there we go. Always add an action. The action should be direct action. Control spawning. So now it creates a new spawner, which is generating a new emitter. And that new emitter is going to be constantly spitting out particles. So this should be, if the age is over a certain point, then this should be creating a source particle with a random position offset. I don't want a random position offset, but I do want direction to be particle direction. The speed should be absolute. Number of particles to spawn. Let's go easy there. I don't know. Let's say 5. That seems like a nice in between. Is that spawning at all? Particle age is greater than 0. Oh, it's greater than 0. Now start spawning. There, got a green. All right, and an emitter. No speed. Apparently speed is being controlled somewhere else. Oh, it's not that. It's the freaking wind, which is not doing anything in the scene right now, so I'm going to turn it off. So now we are creating a whole wave of particles here. Now those particles are being spawned based off of these. So what we could do is, let's go ahead and make those a different color. These should be a little whiter. So what should, like, these are getting spawned, that's all good. They should be taking on, that's the direction. Self spawning, no. Random position offset, no. Is there an inherit? I don't know if there's an inherit on here. But, and then we say 1. Is it each spawning 1? Yeah. So that's all well and good. But the kill shouldn't be having any effect on our original emitter. We don't care about that. So let's go to modifiers, kill. Don't worry about that. Emitter, it is, well, I guess it's already included in it. So let's make sure that the kill is seeing the correct connect, which it is. And those are getting emitted. And they should be getting killed if they touch one of those. Are they getting killed if they touch one? Kind of looks like they are, but it's hard to tell. See how we get that little jitter, jitter, jitter. We gotta trust one of these corners, I think. Yeah, you see how they're like popping in and out of existence, but then when it's on the outside, it suddenly chills out. So I think that those are working. So then those are getting emitted and they're moving no speed, but we should be able to have them emit. They're emitting as a rectangle, but we can do a offset origin and emit them offset from the original surface a little bit, which means they're being born into the kill in theory, although they seem to live a little bit above it. Well, I mean, it's just still blatantly not working because, and I don't know, maybe the rig I'm working with is too complicated. But what I want to see is a pouring of particles from there. But instead, we're just seeing a bunch of particles here in the middle, and those should have all been born on the interior, which would be they'd be dead. Motion inheritance. Yes, I want to do motion inheritance. So I would think we'd see none of these particles and only see ones from the edge. I'll give that a save. These are really interesting questions. I want to get it very, very precise. So let's go ahead and do a new rig. So I'm going to make a cube, and I'm going to move it over 100 units. I'm going to copy and paste it. I'm going to move it over 100 or 200 units. So now we make a connect object, and we'll put those inside the connect to treat it as one. Don't weld. And now they're not separate. So now it's as simple of a rig as I think we can get. We can see a bunch of particles exist, but if there any exist on that middle line, then they're not behaving correctly. So let's go ahead and create a emitter. And the emitter is going to be based off of an object. And the object is going to be the connect. They're going to emit from the polygon area based on the normal, stick to the object, and so even speed and everything shouldn't matter because they're just going to play and they're going to be stuck there. And interestingly, they're all cloning on the one object and not the other. Let's go and make that a circle. Now our connect object should be turning those into one object. So why? That's saying any object. Oh, I dragged the cube in. Whoops. Okay, so those are appearing everywhere. But if we go to an X-ray mode, then now we can see we got a whole wall of the points on the interior as well. So that's all good. It's expected. Now, if we tell it, let's set up a very simple version of the kill. So let's make a particle control kill. And it should kill based on an object. The object will be the connect. So that's just saying, hey, kill it if it appears inside. And now, well, as far as I can tell, it's killing everything. It's killing every single particle that's inside. And everything is inside. Am I doing something wrong there? Oh, it's object. But yeah, oh yeah, inside bounds, and that's an object, but we say an object. And now it's inside or outside the object. And yeah, they're all dying. Now if I go to my emitter, I don't think this will work, but if I said offset origin, and I give it a couple offset points. Interesting. This seems to be introducing some sort of imperfection into X particles, where it is creating the particle far away and then trying to snap it to the surface, but that introduces a little bit of variation, where they can exist slightly offset from the surface, even though they shouldn't be. But because this is so dang precise, all of those interior ones are not being generated because our scene is so dang precise. But if we introduce just a tiny imperfection in here, I imagine that we'd be able to get a lot of them existing. Well, that's weird. Look, I just moved them super far away and they still can't generate there. Why is that? Why are none appearing on... Oh, there's one. One little one. Look how many are appearing on these walls, but only one is appearing there. Why is that? I don't trust it. I don't trust it. That everything about that seems weird to me. So those shouldn't be getting generated because they should be getting killed, but I don't want the kill affecting this. So I'm going to say modifier exclude the kill. So now they're just generating points everywhere. So that's fine. So what I want to do is a shot of particles. Boom. We're going to do a single shot of 1,000. And now they're just there. They just have this set of particles. And now we can have these particles spit out other ones. You may need a list of all the objects within the connect in the XP kill. I don't know about that. You're saying that if I move this box away, instead of feeding it, I can't, but no, but the entire point is we can't feed in sub-objects because it doesn't know how to deal with those. So once we go into the other rig, that is just not an option. So I'm not even going to pursue that here because we couldn't have that do anything here. So anyway, you can see now these are all now source points where things can be emitted from. In fact, I'm going to set the offset origin back to 0. So those can all emit points. So let's go ahead and add in a question. Add a question, and the question is going to be if the age is greater than 0, then it gets to add an action, and the action is going to be a direct action. A direct action is going to be to control spawning, and the control spawning is going to create an emitter, and the emitter will be make it a child there just so I can visually tell that that's what's controlling it. And I hit play. And what happens? Not much, because everything might be getting killed, maybe. But let's go ahead and change our display to yellow. Circles. Hit play. What are we seeing here? All right, not much yet. Particle age is greater than 0. Control the spawning action. Controlling spawning action says create it. Don't do a random position offset. Don't do a random spherical. I want you to be based off the particle direction. And particle speed is absolute. Number of particles spawned will be 1. Particle life, that's all good, all good, all good. Emission. Full lifespan, speed. 0. Get rid of the kill for a moment. Why is, where are, oh look, there is a handful of little yellow ones in there. Let's make sure that they're bigger so I can see them. Boing. Okay, now you can see that we have these bigger green ones. I thought I made them yellow and I just increased the radius. Oh no, I increased the radius of the other one. Whoopsie. There we go. That's more what I was expecting. Okay, so now we are indeed creating those extra particles. Now, I'm going to say I actually want to offset those. So we're going to go to the object. I'm going to say I want to offset from origin a bunch. So now, when we play, it should pretty much look like that. Except that they're pushing straight up and they're pushing straight down, but why aren't they pushing out and out from our edges? Go to our emitter, and the particle direction is set to the normal. Let's even do the Phong normal. That's the particle direction, but direction might not be meaningful unless we extend our data to using rotation. Do we need to do that? Nope. Also spawning, spawn particle position, source particle determined. Maybe I don't want a random offset, but let's say determined by emitter. Oh, okay, that's just freaking. I want it to be based on the source particle. Heading, pitch, speed, reverse, spawning particle, number, directions, variation. How do we offset it? I would think that this offset, origin offset X and Y. The emitter shape is, I mean, it should be based off the object, so none of those should be variables. Emitter plane, 0 plus retiming emission. Oh, come on. Why? I thought this would be a really, really, really simple part of this, which would be all these particles should be born. They should be sticking to the surface, and the emitter is explicitly saying to emit from the polygon area, but the particle direction should be the particle normal. That should be the orientation. And it is seemingly on the top because they're hovering, and it seemingly is on the bottom because they are below the ground. But over here, they are not inside or outside, so it doesn't seem to be taking on the normal direction at all. That's weird. Bump. I'm just clicking around random settings. Yeah, even sticking or not sticking isn't doing anything. Well, Pete, when you say random, what do you mean random? Random what? Or do you mean random direction? So now they could have a random direction. Oh, okay, well, additionally weird. I just told this emitter to have its particle direction be random. And I hit play, and it generates all the particles. But look, all these are still perfectly vertical, which is implying to me that this, when spawning them, is not looking at particle position, right angle, direction, relative to the source particle direction. Let's do relative to the source particle rotation. What? They all seem to be facing, they're all going to the right now when I say the direction of the particle rotation. Particle direction is what we had been saying that we should pick. but this just pushes it up and down. Particle direction, random. Particle direction, normal. I didn't think we'd hit this problem. I mean, I'm glad I simplified the scene, but I didn't think we'd hit this simple of a problem this quickly. Okay, well, I just found a temporary, well, something of a solution. It seems like it can't determine a direct. Here's new information. New information, everybody. There cannot be a particle direction determined unless the particle has speed. If there's some speed, then it's like, oh, I have a direction now. I understand. So now look, everything is offset properly from that surface. Okay, fine. That's something. Okay, well, now you can see that those particles are very clearly in that shape, and those particles are very clearly in that shape. So now we activate the kill again, and boom, instantly those are born, but then they die. So born, they die. So we probably don't want them existing for that little flash of a moment, but this is what the point is now we could be emitting these particles. We can give them a little speed, and we can give them some shortened life. They can live for 5 frames. And then we can tell the control spawning, emit. How do we keep it emitting? What is this doing? It's action controlled. Oh, we need to go back into the question. Or, I'm sorry, we have to go back into the emitter, go to the question, and tell it to do every refresh. So now we're constantly emitting all of these everywhere. Now the only trick is you can see that at any given moment, we've got this whole wave of particles that are being born and living. We can see that we get this single line of them on the interior or exterior as they are blowing out in that direction. And with them going out in those directions, we still have that single frame of them being there. So is there a way of killing them? Is there like an order of operations here where that's telling them to die? I essentially want them to die before they even had a chance to really exist. Is that something that can be done? I've never specifically done it. We get that single frame of them being on the inside. Now, this is the basic setup, but now we need to start complicating it, slowly introducing additional elements. So that starts making, so I want to add in some random motion. I'm going to use Grayscale Gorilla's signal tag, so I can add in some random rotation. Let's just do 90, 90, 90. So now, as this is moving around, super funky. Oh man, it's well, okay, get that close, it makes my eyeballs hurt a little bit. You move away, it looks cool, but oh, Sam, that's an interesting idea. It's a bit of a fake, but I like it. Have them be born really tiny, and then they suddenly grow into their full scale. Is there an automatic way to do that, or do you have to do it with a question? We'll have it be the scale or the radius or the scale, but yeah, you're saying do a 0.001 scale on everything, and then grow into their scale, which is that's a good trick. It's a good workaround if we had to have it there. So I'll use it for the initial one. So I had a question: if the age is greater than 0, add an action. The action will be direct action. Is it a direct action? Is it oh, change scale. Direct change or change scale, change radius, change scale to 1, 1, 1. There we go. So let's see. We chill out signal. Well, the radius is still there, but the scale is. You can see that these inner ones are still there, and that's what we don't want. All of these shouldn't be here. So is that because we're seeing the radius, but the scale of the actual one would be there? In which case, do we also need to say that the emission radius is 0? And then also at that age, add another direct action. Is there a change radius? It might just be the group. Change scale, change speed. I think it would probably be a direct action. We can change the group. Oh, change radius right there. All right, there we go. Okay, well, okay, so now indeed, yeah, the radius is being created at 0, and then it's scaling up to 1. So they don't exist for that very first frame, but then they suddenly do. So now at least we have the illusion of them not being there, even if they are being created. So that does create a lot of redundancy, but that seems good. Yeah, I added. Oh, okay, Sam, you're saying I could have added some sort of add modifier and then just clamped it. Instead, I just did it action controlled, which also worked. But it sounds like your way would also work. All right, so now those are being generated. That's all good. They're dying in the middle. So now let's let signal take over again. These can be flying around doing their thing. And those should die if ever they end up inside of the shape. But then what we do is we'd also make these we make this a dynamic object. So I can say X particle collider, and that's what I want to do is collide on the outside, bounce, friction. Yeah, all those are fine. So yeah, I don't want them to die. I want them to actually bounce off the edge. It suddenly is doing a big old hiccup there. I'll save it. Hard to tell exactly with how quickly everything's moving in the sheer number of particles there. We can hit this and make it a little more solid. And yeah, these don't live for very long, so that's an additional variable. We could go ahead and slow our speed down and have them live for longer. And then we add some gravity. Now, if they bounce off the edge, I would hope that they wouldn't get killed. It's a little hard to tell, but what we could do there is potentially expand the bounds here. I think there's a setting for that. Expand, yeah. We expand the range a little bit so that hopefully it would bounce, and it's going to be harder for them to travel inside and thus get killed. They should be able to slide on the outside, but we might need to do more steps per frame or something. Even regardless, I'm fine with some of that. So we're generating particles, and all those are getting created on the inside, and those are the redundant ones. And those are the ones, yeah, that we definitely don't want. So now, if we want to actually apply this to our problem at hand, it goes more to not this randomly rotating around, but little imperfections, or it's spreading out. I'm going to add, let's see, collision, scatter. Okay, cool. Yeah, they're most, at least in this case, they're mostly not getting deleted. They're bouncing and scattering off the overall shape. Let's go ahead and chill those out. I guess the radius is now being controlled by an action. Oh, I didn't need to make both of those. I could turn one on into two. Yay. 1 is fine. Okay, so those all live. I'm going to make them solid, circle filled, just to make it a little easier to see. Alrighty, so those are generating around, they're raining around. That's all good. These middle ones are not being able to generate. So now the next step is how far apart they are, and if these chunks, if I were to move this one away, is it able to start generating those interior ones? Really, really hard to see with so much happening. But as far as I can tell, they're not. Because they're being generated further away than that space is allowing them to be. All right. Conceptually, I mean, it's just very clean. So now let's go ahead and fracture an object up and keep it simple. Let's see if we can see if this is applicable, if this can apply. So I'm going to fracture that. I'm going to put it into a connect object. We're not going to weld it. We're going to save this as the next iteration of this particular file, 5B. And now that becomes the collider. We don't need that at all. In the initial emitter, it is seeing the connect object. We need the, that's colliding, that's emitting. And then the kill also needs the connect. All right, I think that's all we have to change. So the idea here would be we literally should be seeing none of these orbs in the middle. And right now, we're not. I don't think we're seeing any of those green ones in the middle. It's only it's hard to tell, but if we spin around, it's easier to see that the interior seems clear of them. So that's all. That's well and good. Now, let's go ahead and go to our dynamic settings. I'm going to make sure dynamics have a collision margin of 0. Let's add dynamics tag to our fracture object. And now gravity should be able to take over and they're just going to fall down. I'm going to make a floor so they can fall down there. And then immediately they all break apart. And then as soon as they break apart, then the interiors, which have always had additional particle spawning points, everything should start spawning them because they're no longer intersecting. But during that fall, it should only be creating them on the outside. Now, we don't actually want them to be on the outside, so now we can go the step further, which is taking our fracture, saying selections, I only want the inside faces on the initial emitter. I don't want it to be just on the connect. I want it to be the connect with inside faces. So now everything is generated only on the interior. Let's temporarily disable that dynamics tag. Everything is generated only on the interior, and if everything's being generated on the interior, we should get no yellow particles. Clearly, we're getting some yellow particles. Now, these yellow particles do have a distance, a significant distance. So if one is near the edge and their angle is such that it could say, oh, spawn it 3 units. Let's say this one is, I'm trying to find the actual particle. It should be the actual offender here. It's really hard to tell which particle is spawning that. But if that is spawning and it's saying like, oh, spawn it 3 units away, and that's going 1, 2, 3, spawning there, and that's successfully living because it was never intersecting. So then our threshold turns into, and then we get some, well, let's see what we got. Everything that's being generated is living on the edge, which is still odd to me because, like, let's see, like that circle right there, I'm assuming that has to be the one that's spawning this one. But why is that the angle? Why, if that is a particle being spawned on the inside, the normal for that should be inside, and thus it should be, that should be creating, unless it's tilted slightly outward. Oh, it is. So those are tilted that way. So what that means, so you see, we're gonna have, this is gonna be tough because we got this push and pull, which is depending on the further we offset our spawn, then the more likely it is to successfully trap it in here. But that also simultaneously means that, see, we have a big offset right now, but if I say an offset 1, most of these will probably go away. So now they're barely offset. So only this one, which is right on the edge, is able to poke out. And only that one, which is right on the edge, is able to poke out. So, okay, that's perfectly logical. We'd still potentially want to find a way around that. With that extra... So, but with that in mind, that means when any little crack is introduced anywhere, a little space, they're very quickly going to be escaping the overall shape. So that becomes two contradictory slide. Like, in order to stop this from happening, we're making it more likely that a very small crack is going to be a problem everywhere else. I'll have to think about that. I'm going to save that. We should be, now, in theory, what we should see is if we run the dynamics on here, the first, and why don't we even make it, can we set the, I could keyframe it. But the first few frames, I guess that's worth doing. I'm going to go just 10 frames forward. We're going to say everything is dynamic. 1 frame earlier, dynamics are off. So this should just sit here for 10 frames, 9 frames, and it's not going to move. And there's just going to be those couple little trickles that are escaping the edge. And then it's going to fall. And even as it's falling, it should be fine. But when it hits the ground, suddenly there's going to be space between all of them, and they should be able to escape. And thus, they'll suddenly be extra. Yeah, these will all be generating particles as they move. That's pretty cool. I mean, it's a neat rig. We have to figure out how to stop these leaks. Yeah, you can clearly see the extra ones flying out there. It's neat. And we're getting a very, you see we're getting these very specific streams coming out, which is cool. I like it. And they're sliding along the surface, and everything there is working great. But they're all very uniform where they are being created. So I would want to probably make it so that they're not living all the time, so that this emitter would be constantly, they're not living the full lifespan. So if we make these only live for like 5 frames, then my hope would be that they're not replenishing. How do we replenish? This is saying per frame. I would think that per frame would mean to keep on generating them. Rate. Okay, well, turning on rate seems to work. So if we have a rate of 10,000, that's a lot. But yeah, now they're dying and getting born randomly on different edges. And so they can suddenly be spawning from all over the place for very short times. So honestly, even that should be the lifespan of 0. So yeah, it's just like bing, 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 bing. It's just constantly spitting them out. So they can't be born when they're interior, but then they can start sliding away. We don't even have geometry glue on here, so it's just a crazy amount of kind of them not wanting the bounce. To put a little more height in there, it should really fall apart. Boom! And then suddenly all these particles can get generated. Very nice, straightforward rig. And you could probably, well, yeah, those are flying apart. I wonder if we could set it so that there's some sort of memory. Did we set the emitter to normal or Fong normal? I don't remember. For the Fong tag here, it should be pretty clean, even with the connect object. Or I guess if we said manual, then it's clean. They should be the same difference then. But the emitter is currently set to normal, not Fong normal. But now we have so many more. You can see that even here that we get a lot of opportunities for them. Actually, yeah, look, it's they're stuck to surface, but they're not moving with it. Let me see. We need to motion inheritance, turn that on the initial emitter. But we still, look, we're still generating all those ones up there. Those shouldn't be getting created. And then the second emitter, that should also have motion inheritance. They should be moving down with it. Okay, well, at least those move down. But look how they're escaping the surface where, you know, I expect like that. But as this is moving down, those particles start living. They're being born one frame higher. So it's, I mean, that might have to do with baking though. Let me see if we bake our dynamics. Ding, 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 baked. Does it still happen? Yes, it still happens. Let's do the MoGraph cache. Bake. And we'll just make a null. And that can hold our dynamics tag just so I can be sure it's not running on it. Hit play. That still happens. I mean, we get all of the same MoGraph breaking apart. But yeah, those being left behind. So there's to me that seems like a order of operations issue where the dynamics are being calculated. The emitter is being calculated after the dynamics have gone, and really I want it to be before. And that's definitely potentially a problem depending on the way the rig was set up. And what's up with those initial, look at these weird initial particles. They're going, wee! Why is that happening? And actually, this is a bigger problem than even I'm saying right now because it's calculating after. You can see that all of these surface, all of these are valid points to be spitting out different chunks. Very valid. But as you see the chunk is moving, these forward ones are trying to spit a particle out, but the particle is being born a frame behind, which means it's now inside of the surface, which means it's getting killed. But these other ones where it's moving away from it, it can be spawned and it moves away from the shape, and thus it doesn't get deleted. So there's got to be a way to stop that from happening. Now, it could be some steps per frame. We can go into our advanced settings, go to X particles. We have sub frame steps. Like that could be something. Let's go ahead and make it 10. Seems to sort of kind of be working. Hard to tell. Definitely seems to be more particles on the right side than the left. They seem to be getting destroyed. So I don't trust that necessarily. Tricky stuff, everybody. Because they look so good when they stop moving, when that's not moving anymore. Like you have all these particles like flowing all over the surface. It looks really nice. But as that's sliding, that's a problem. Does anybody have any expertise in why that might be happening? Because it's both the problem up here and the problem sliding. That is the tricky part. That's the fact right there. If we can't solve that, then I lose a lot of faith in this technique. Think-a-do. We could do a point cache. I'm not sure that's actually something that works. What else can we do? What else could we do? They're inheriting, they're moving with it, they're taking on the speed, they're offset correctly based on the normal. Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of stumped. But you know what? We're quickly approaching 3 hours for this, and there's a bunch of cool new information that I really like learning. This is all good stuff, but I need to do some more R&D on exactly why this is happening. Maybe I can bug Bob a little bit about why that might be happening with this nice simplified version of the file. I'm very happy to see that we were able to get a lot of that working, being very meticulous. And honestly, it was a little bit silly of me to be doing it in a big, complicated scene. Um, like I'm the one who's constantly saying like, no, 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 copy it and do it. Do your tests on the most simplified version of things you can think of. This poor little one. Why must its points die? Why must they be cut away? Volume objects independent. Only born. Only born. That doesn't work. What does isolated mean? I'm just going to click it because I'm curious. I don't know. Doesn't seem to make a difference. Oh, that kills. That'll kill particles off apparently that are by themselves and lonely, hanging out in the middle of nowhere. This is already refreshing every frame to do the kill. Well, nobody seems to have any additional idea. So we are going to officially wrap this one up. For anybody who got to come and hang out from seeing a YouTube link in your email, this was kind of a bonus stream. This is the bonus stream that I do every week for the Patreon supporters who are at the technician or engineer level or above. So it's a bonus stream where I'm just kind of trying to figure things out. Maybe we'll do some bigger project type things, but we've run into limitations there. And it's just where I can kind of answer my own questions a little bit more and spend more time really diving in, which I don't think would make for a good regular Rocket Lasso Live. That would take up, like, one question might take the entire time if we're really going through and trying to learn it. But essentially going through and doing these and learning some of these extra techniques is what is enabling me to answer those other questions, because I need to fundamentally understand why these things are doing what they're doing. So that should wrap this one up. It was fun. We got some of this X particle stuff working pretty well. We are definitely hitting some limitations. But at the same time, we did successfully go to this braking stuff here and getting these brakes to, ignoring the X particles, like getting this brake and then using the weights to be able to make those brake even more as they keep going flying. Like as they keep going and it's brake more and more. That is super cool. Like that's something I've been wanting to do for a while, and it ended up being way easier than I thought it would. And we even learned some cool things about the having to trick the noise to refresh with the .001. A lot of little details. So there's some fun stuff there. So it was a fun one. Thank you so much, everybody. I'm gonna probably go and bug Bob and see if he's got some extra answers for me. So thank you so much. A special extra fun shout out for the super supporter of the second or third month in a row, if it ever decides to pop up here. Come on. Come on, Restream. Restream's freaking out, so I'm going to just let it do its own thing. I don't even think I can click the holding button because it's kind of hanging on there. So, oh yeah, man, I might have to force quit the streaming app because it doesn't want to end the stream. So, okay, I'm just going to have to try and make it do something. I don't want to close it. I don't want to make it's always a pain to do an edit when it didn't crop well. It'll still save the file, but I can't tab over to it. Yeah, happy 4th of July, everybody. I didn't even mention that, but it's the 4th of July here in the U.S. It's fireworks night. Ba, 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 ba. Nope, the streaming software, while doing a great job of still streaming, does not want to allow me to click the interface and to stop it from going. We're just going to have to keep the stream going forever. So here we go, everybody. We're going to go straight into a Friday stream. Now, I'm going to have to, yeah, kill the stream modifier. Yep, I got nothing. I'm going to have to just force quit it or close window. So, bye-bye, everybody. Have a good one. Let's see if it actually closes. I clicked close. It might still be here. I don't know. It's spinning. There's a little circle going zzz. And let me see. Still here. Still here, everybody. All right, now I'm going to pull up the task manager and actually force it to quit. XSplit broadcaster. Look at all those processes. Look at all those hooks, extensions. None of them, I mean, they all seem to be behaving normally. Look, none of these seem like they're going nuts or taking up more than they should be. But if it doesn't want to cooperate, then I just have to kill it.